All right, welcome back to the New Sentinel, folks. Today we're diving into some heavy stuff. Recent court decisions that are, honestly, shaking up the whole landscape. I'm Chukwuka, and with me as always are Major Ethan, Olga, and Duke. Now let's start with the Supreme Court's latest term. I mean, you look at these rulings: transgender rights, preventive health care, ghost guns. It's like every headline is a new battleground for civil liberties. And, I remember back when I was deployed, trying to explain Supreme Court decisions to the guys in my unit. Some of them just wanted to know if it'd affect their pay or their families. Others got real fired up about the social stuff. It's wild how these rulings hit home, even thousands of miles away.
Yeah, Chukwuka, you're right. The Supreme Court's been on a tear this term. That ghost gun decision, man, that's got law enforcement and gun owners both on edge. And the transgender rights case, that's not just legal theory, that's real people's lives. I mean, you look at the preventive health care ruling, too. Suddenly what's covered and what's not is up in the air. It's like the court's drawing new lines in the sand and nobody's quite sure where to stand.
And it's not just about the law, it's about the people who are most vulnerable. The transgender rights ruling, for example, has a direct impact on access to gender-affirming care. For many, this is a matter of survival, not just policy. When the court makes these decisions, it's the marginalized who feel it first and hardest. I think we have to keep that in mind. These aren't just abstract debates.
Yeah, but let's not forget, the court's job is to interpret the law, not to legislate from the bench. I get that these rulings have real-world effects, but sometimes folks act like the Supreme Court's supposed to fix every problem. That ghost gun ruling, for example, it's about the Second Amendment, plain and simple. You start chipping away at that, you're opening the door to a lot more than just gun kits.
That's true, Duke, but you can't ignore how these decisions ripple out. Like I said, I've seen soldiers from all walks of life react to these rulings. Some relieved, some angry, some just confused. It's a reminder that the law isn't just words on paper. It's something that shapes our daily lives, whether we're in uniform or not.
So, speaking of power plays, let's talk about this Emile Bove nomination. Senate Republicans pushed him through, even with a walkout, and folks on both sides raising eyebrows. It's like watching a chess match where someone's willing to sacrifice a piece just to keep the initiative. The whole thing exposes how judicial appointments have become these high-stakes tactical battles. You gotta wonder, are we picking judges for their legal minds or just for their loyalty?
Look, Ethan, I'm all for loyalty. You want someone on the bench who understands what's at stake, especially with the way the country's been going. But yeah, the Bove thing, there's a lot of heat there. The walkout, the objections. It's just more proof that the judiciary's become another front in the political war. And then you got Trump v. CASA, right? That case is a big one. Nationwide injunctions, executive authority, immigration. It's all on the table.
But that's exactly the problem, Duke. When the courts become a political battlefield, it's the rule of law that suffers. Trump v. CASA is a perfect example. The debate over nationwide injunctions isn't just legal nitpicking. It's about whether one judge can protect people's rights across the country, or if executive power can steamroll over local communities. I worry that we're losing sight of the people caught in the middle: immigrants, families, those who don't have a voice in these power struggles.
Olga, that's a good point. And Ethan, your chess analogy fits. Every move in the judiciary, whether it's a nomination or a big case like Trump versus CASA, sets up the next play. Sometimes it's about blocking. Sometimes it's about forcing your opponent's hand. But at the end of the day, it's not just a game. These decisions have real consequences, especially when it comes to who gets to make the rules and who has to live by them. And as we talked about in that episode on nationwide injunctions, the balance between the courts and the executive is always shifting. It's a constant tug of war.
Yeah, and just like in chess, sometimes you gotta think 3 moves ahead. The fallout from these decisions, whether it's Bove on the bench or the limits on injunctions, could shape the legal landscape for years. It's not just about today's headlines. It's about setting the board for the next generation.
Let's take this global for a minute. Brazil's Supreme Court just made a huge move. Now social media platforms are liable for hate speech and incitement. That's a big deal, not just for Brazil, but for the whole world. I was in Sao Paulo last year, reporting on activists who were fighting a wave of online hate. After this ruling, I spoke to a young woman who said, "Now we have a tool. We're not just shouting into the void anymore." It's empowering, but it also puts a lot of pressure on tech companies to actually act.
That's a powerful story, Olga. And you're right, this isn't just a local issue. We've seen in previous episodes, like when we talked about digital trade wars, how tech regulation in one country can set off a chain reaction. If Brazil can hold platforms accountable, you can bet other countries are watching, maybe even planning to follow suit. It's a new kind of global precedent.
Yeah, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. There's a fine line between fighting hate speech and shutting down free speech. Once you start making platforms liable, you risk overcorrection, censorship, shadow bans, all that. I get the need to protect people, but you gotta be careful not to throw out the First Amendment with the bathwater, even if it's not the U.S. we're talking about.
And then you got the ICC stepping in with arrest warrants for Taliban leaders. Finally, some movement on international justice. Charging them for crimes against Afghan women, that's a big step. But, as always, the question is, will it actually change anything on the ground? Or is it just another piece on the board that nobody wants to move?
It's a fair question, Ethan, but for the women in Afghanistan, even a symbolic move can mean hope. It's a signal that the world is watching, that impunity isn't guaranteed. And maybe, just maybe, it gives activists and survivors a little more leverage. We have to keep pushing for accountability, even when it feels slow or symbolic.
Well, that's all we've got time for today. These court decisions, whether in Washington, Brasilia, or The Hague, are shaping the world in ways we're only beginning to understand. Thanks for joining us on The New Sentinel. We'll be back soon to break down whatever comes next. Ethan, Olga, Duke, always a pleasure.
Good talk, y'all. Stay sharp out there.
Thank you, everyone. Let's keep fighting for justice wherever it's needed.
Roger that. Catch y'all next time. Out.